The Republic of Korea Army has now officially begun its advance northward. All the fierce battles at the demilitarized zone have ended, and every frontline corps and division has started a full-scale offensive. There were considerable delays and some casualties, but it was a level we had to endure to prevent even greater losses. The Republic of Korea Army launched a large-scale offensive toward North Korea with all its forces, and even the mobilized reserve divisions that had been prepared in advance began advancing north as well. The front line was split into western, central, and eastern axes. On the western front, 1st and 7th Corps moved to Pyongyang, while on the central front, 2nd and 5th Corps advanced to Wonsan via Route 5. On the eastern front, the 3rd Corps moved north along Route 7 on the east coast. Ground Operations Command gave the attack order, and the earth-shaking tracks began moving. The 3rd Corps managed the whole eastern front alone, demanding significant tactics and strategy. The 3rd Corps was renowned for its extensive training and was nearly the only national unit to enter North Korea and fight in major battles. The Scorpion unit was active around the Gyeonggang area, and the 12th, 21st, and 22nd divisions were also advancing north. After breaching the demilitarized zone, our forces swiftly hit enemy strongholds with maneuver warfare and concentrated firepower. In particular, by using the Air Force and reconnaissance drones to identify the enemy's defensive lines in advance, we minimized casualties by launching concentrated bombardments with K-9 self-propelled howitzers and fighter jets. With fire support, our K-1A2 tanks and K-808 units quickly advanced and overpowered North Korean forces. The 22nd Division appeared confident, ambitiously aiming to reach Wonsan in a week. North Korea's decades-old defensive structures and minefields in the demilitarized zone have been fully removed. Except for the Taebaek Mountains, East Coast roads are well built, making it possible to reach Wonsan in a single day. General Kang Il-hyun, commander of the 22nd Infantry Division, was confident but cautious. That's also why the 22nd Infantry Division hadn't faced major losses yet. Whenever possible, he boldly drove the enemy back and only engaged in battles where victory could be achieved with minimal casualties for our troops. The 22nd Infantry Division's intelligence and reconnaissance battalions teamed up with the Scorpion unit to check for North Korean ambushes en route to Wonsan. They also actively used surveillance assets such as UAVs and satellites to focus on identifying enemy positions. The investigation found most enemy forces hiding in Gyeonggang. Continuous bombardment left both the North Korean army and Chinese PMCs as walking corpses. The field artillery, 50 squadrons were dropping bombs, and the K-9 self-propelled howitzers were also shelling, making it truly reminiscent of hell. The bombing and shelling stripped the mountain bare, making it resemble a dragon at rest. Even the beautiful Gyeonggang burned, but we had to endure it to reduce our casualties. After days of bombing, on September 2, the 22nd Infantry Division advanced toward Wonsan. After we breached the demilitarized zone, North Korean forces couldn't resist effectively. Our overwhelming firepower destroyed all North Korean strongholds and demolished their decades-old tunnels. The Chinese PMCs had retreated by then, and North Korea's top military ranks had collapsed. In some cases, even entire battalions surrendered at once, leading to debates about how to handle the large number of prisoners. According to international law, the prisoners were detained, and trucks and buses were constantly used to transport them to prisoner of war camps in the rear. So many North Korean soldiers surrendered at once that up to 300 were captured at a time, and even after trucks transported them, more kept arriving. Since supplies didn't reach the rear, many surrendered due to hunger. Despite North Korea's ideological education, hunger made ideology irrelevant. The South Korean army struggled to manage these prisoners, a problem occurring nationwide. We couldn't move the prisoners using just military trucks and vehicles, since they were immediately needed for operations. As a result, the Ministry of National Defense urgently cooperated with civilian bus companies to secure additional means of transportation. Major bus companies in Seoul, Busan, and Daegu were mobilized. Red, blue, and green buses, normally for commuters and tours, were used to transport prisoners. Armed Republic of Korea soldiers rode buses guarding prisoners, who sat with hands tied behind their backs during transport. It was quite a sight. They were sent to prisoner camps in Gyeongsang province. Though the camps were large, expecting many prisoners, statistics soon showed they'd soon be full. Civilians protested when they saw these prisoner transport buses. After all, these were the people who had killed their children, family members, and friends, so it was impossible for them to welcome them with open arms. Opinions varied, from questioning why taxpayer money should protect enemy soldiers, to arguing prisoners deserve Geneva Convention treatment. Thousands of prisoners lived in containers and tents, which gradually increased until they formed a large village. Food and medical aid were given only at the minimum required by international law, since supplying our frontline troops was the top priority. Some prisoners were sent to government agencies for interrogation, where we gained valuable information. locations of nuclear facilities, North Korean military positions, and diplomatic details. For example, thanks to finding out the location of the North Korean 5th Corps commander, we were able to launch a Hyunmoo missile there and achieve a great victory by killing the 5th Corps commander Chae Do-young. However, some South Korean soldiers acted hostile toward these prisoners. Seeing their comrades die on the battlefield, the South Korean soldiers couldn't just stand by and sometimes showed anger toward the prisoners. In fact, there were many cases where beatings and torture continued. Some soldiers were harsh to prisoners, but military police and command still followed international law. Such phenomena continued to appear amid the brutal war. Maybe it's only natural. The 22nd Infantry Division advanced north, meeting many North Korean soldiers, but saw little actual combat. There was some fighting in the demilitarized zone, but once we crossed that defensive line and advanced north, most of the North Korean soldiers we encountered at the front were laying down their weapons and surrendering. As a result, the 22nd Infantry Division made a mistake. They let their guard down. As they advanced and only met surrendering North Korean soldiers, they became careless, which ended in disaster. The surrendering North Korean soldiers were in tears, and as they were slowly being guided, the surrendering North Korean soldiers suddenly pulled grenades and bombs from their clothes and started throwing them at the South Korean troops. South Korean troops fired late at surrendering North Korean soldiers, and the explosions from grenades and bombs caused many casualties. Shortly after, anti-tank weapons were fired from the mountain at our tanks and armored vehicles, with several launched during the attack. The inexperienced recruits were flustered, while experienced soldiers stayed calm. Fortunately, the anti-tank weapons fired by the North Korean army did not cause significant damage to our armored forces, but they still showed the brutal reality of war. This battle resulted in 5 of our soldiers and 49 North Korean soldiers killed. The North Korean army began to pretend to surrender and launch surprise attacks just like the Japanese army did to the United States forces in the past. Because of this, some of our soldiers stopped taking North Korean soldiers as prisoners, since capturing them could put their own lives at risk. Consequently, prisoner executions increased. The Jeongal unit was the northernmost unit. North Korean reconnaissance soldiers saw the Jeongal unit continuously advancing, and they launched a mortar attack against them. As mortar shells exploded one after another from a long distance, the Jeongal unit was driven into a corner. In particular, a small detachment of the Jeongal unit became the main target and was under concentrated attack. This small detachment reminded the troops to stay alert, which helped reduce casualties. Soon after, North Korean soldiers in Gyeonggang-san fired from higher ground, forcing the Jeongal unit detachment to fight back from below. Some Jeonggal unit members were shot and fell, but others didn't help. This was expected. The manual said they must treat themselves until the enemy was subdued and eliminate the threat or risk being harmed. Thanks to the Jeongal unit's advanced training, the North Korean soldiers who ambushed them were quickly subdued. The Jeongal unit carried the fallen soldier and retreated. Their company commander tried to locate the source of the mortar fire. He easily determined the location. He figured it out because the mortar site lacked trees, and the house's unique shape let him watch from afar with binoculars. They were reassembling the mortar and getting ready to attack again. The company commander ordered the reserve unit to attack that area, and the Scorpion unit charged, running over the mountain as if it were flat ground. The Scorpion unit calmly approached the North Korean soldiers and eliminated them one by one with precise shots. Just 30 minutes after the order was given, they succeeded in capturing the mortar position. The Scorpion unit managed to seize the mortars and the radio that had been in the position, and then they sent these back to headquarters to gather information. As they fought, the Scorpion unit seized part of Gyeonggangsan and chose to support the 3rd Corps' advance to Wonsan. The Scorpion unit fought better because the battle was in the mountains. When many enemy forces were on the road, they used the mountains to get ahead and surround them from both sides, performing a pincer movement. As the Scorpion unit defeated North Korean troops across Mount Gyeomgang, they witnessed something unbelievable. They saw many Chinese troops and volunteers being transported by trucks. The 3rd Corps advanced north and had reached Jangjeon. They traveled 13 kilometers in a straight line in one day at a fast pace. During the Crusades, King Richard the Lionheart's knights marched up to 16 kilometers daily, advancing at a similar pace. At this speed, they could have occupied Wonsan within 5 days. Fortunately, this was possible because there was almost no resistance from the North Korean army. Most surrendered or fled, while Japanese shadow forces hid in the mountains. Even then, they were discovered by the intelligence company and reconnaissance units, and were either killed or taken prisoner. The 22nd Division advanced smoothly until they faced an unexpected, formidable enemy. Anti-tank missiles and drones struck the K-808 armored vehicle, setting it on fire and causing chaos in the 22nd Division. They quickly launched a counterattack, but our forces were outgunned. They weren't North Korean soldiers or Chinese PMCs, but Chinese volunteers. China avoided sending its regular army, instead using volunteers known as the Volunteer Army. They dispatched a large-scale force. They used new Russian weapons and tactics to harass us with small mobile units, anti-tank weapons, and drones. Numerous suicide drones began flying toward our forces. There were just so many of them. The 22nd Division advanced along Route 7 and engaged in battle with the Chinese Volunteer Army. And in various places, IEDs suddenly exploded. Enemy drones exploded overhead, causing Republic of Korea infantry casualties, while snipers targeted soldiers individually. The Chinese Volunteer Army fought well and gradually pressured the 22nd Division by securing vehicles. The Republic of Korea forces counterattack using K9 self-propelled howitzers to shell Chinese Volunteer Army defenses. A squadron of field artillery 50s also attacked the Chinese Volunteer Army's rear positions. The issue was the Chinese Volunteer Army harassed Republic of Korea forces by hiding in central Jangjeon buildings. Machine gun nests in the buildings killed Republic of Korea soldiers one by one, turning the densely built city into a fortress. The Chinese Volunteer Army mainly used grenades, tripwires, and other methods to set deadly traps for the Republic of Korea forces. You can't destroy all the buildings in the city, and since vehicles and aircraft can't find and eliminate enemies hiding inside, infantry must handle the job. As a result, the Republic of Korea forces suffered significant manpower and equipment losses. Additionally, with civilians still present, the Republic of Korea forces were unable to act. Additionally, many soldiers were unprepared for urban combat due to a lack of proper training. The Chinese Volunteer Army used modern urban warfare tactics learned from the Ukraine War. They created small maneuver teams for dispersed combat and stationed snipers, anti-tank weapons, and heavy arms on upper floors to target Republic of Korea army tanks and vehicles. They used first-person view drones to attack vehicles and infantry, slowing the Republic of Korea Army's advance. First-person view drones were so powerful that the 22nd Division hesitated to enter the Jangjeon area. Over 20 soldiers have died due to drones used by the Chinese Volunteer Army. Meanwhile, the Jeongal unit observed the 22nd Division attacking Jangjeon from Mount Gumgang. The Jeongal unit decided to send some of its troops to Jangjeon to support the 22nd Division. It was about the size of a battalion. The Jeongal unit was known for being the strongest in field operations. Now, it was time for them to prove themselves in urban warfare. In urban warfare, it's more effective to infiltrate from the sides and rear than to attack head-on. With closely packed buildings, fast movement and surprise attacks are vital, but close quarters combat skills matter most. Urban warfare usually takes place at a distance of 5 to 10 meters from the enemy, and the Jeonggal unit would go through such battles several times a year. The Jeonggal unit and Hangi battalion avoided a frontal attack, instead descending from Gyeonggang-san to strike from the rear and then infiltrate the city. They deployed sniper teams in multiple locations, including Han, placing them in high-rises to target enemy machine gun positions in Jangjeon town. They also started identifying enemies inside buildings using thermal imaging equipment. They began making effective use of small drones as well. At the same time, to prepare for any situation, they deployed additional reconnaissance teams to the north to be ready for any reinforcements coming from that direction. They deployed small strike teams with each squad checking buildings as they advanced. During urban warfare, the Jeonggal unit found a weakness in the Chinese Volunteer Army. Their strong defensive lines had isolated, widely spaced outposts. Thanks to this, the Jeonggal unit decided to use this to separate the enemy and then attack each one individually. The 22nd Division distracted the Chinese Volunteer Army, while the Jeonggal unit infiltrated from behind, capturing their outposts one by one. At each outpost, the Chinese Volunteer Army set booby traps, causing heavy casualties. This made the Jeonggal unit hesitant. The Chinese Volunteer Army resisted desperately, firing until the last man, while the Jeonggal unit swiftly cleared the buildings as they advanced. However, in the city, the Chinese Volunteer Army was putting up a stubborn resistance. Even for the Jeonggal unit, it was a situation where they had no choice but to endure casualties. In that situation, when they heard that Jangjeon AU was under attack, the Chinese Volunteer Army decided to send additional troops. The troops were divided among 5 trucks. The exact number of troops is unknown, but it was clear that if they entered the city for urban warfare, the battle would be prolonged. That's why the Jeonggal unit in the northern region had to stop them. Thanks to the Jeonggal unit organizing reconnaissance teams in various places, they were able to quickly assess the situation. The Jeonggal unit was waiting on the rooftop of a building they had occupied in the northernmost area of Jangjeon Iubo. They aimed a Panzerfaust anti-tank weapon, and the Jeonggal unit responded immediately. The firepower squads waiting on the high ground and rooftops opened fire all at once as the trucks came within range. The Jeonggal unit hit the lead vehicle, then the rear one, blocking any movement forward or backward. They then removed the trucks one by one from the center, completely overwhelming the Chinese volunteers. The Chinese volunteer soldiers riding in the trucks fell into a state of panic. Some soldiers jumped off the trucks and ran away, while some Chinese volunteer soldiers fired their guns into the air. The Jeongal unit's sniper teams, seeing this, were picking off the fleeing soldiers one by one. In the end, they succeeded in eliminating all 5 trucks. Over 50 Chinese volunteer soldiers died there. The Jeonggal unit had no casualties, which helped their reputation spread widely among Chinese volunteer soldiers. After successfully repelling even the Central Plains Army, the Jeongal unit cooperated with the 22nd Division. The 22nd Division attacked from the front, while the Jeongal unit attacked from the rear and flanks, and together they succeeded in wiping out the resisting Chinese volunteer soldiers. A Jeongal unit member killed 45 enemies in this battle. Chinese volunteer soldiers focused on the 22nd Division didn't expect the Jeongal unit's rear infiltration. Of 12 strongholds in Jangjeon town, 9 were captured and snipers neutralized, 3 machine gun positions. The Jeongal unit quickly opened the Republic of Korea Army's advance route in one day and captured a Chinese volunteer battalion commander. When the battalion commander was given to the 22nd Division, his face was bruised, but that's the reality of war. However, they did need to regroup. They had used up so many shells that they needed to be resupplied. The 22nd Division regrouped and resupplied at Jangjeon and Jeonggal, taking about a day before moving north. War isn't just about constantly pushing forward at the front lines. Consider both the soldiers' fatigue in battle and their supplies. We had to cool the overheated atmosphere for a day. South Korean defense companies were running factories 24/7 to produce military supplies. A variety of ammunition, such as 5.56 mm or 7.62 mm 59 caliber machine guns and bullets, were being produced non-stop on the conveyor belts. Production facilities had run at full capacity for a long time, with workers operating 24/7 in shifts. No young men were present. Most were middle-aged, in their 50s and 60s, with some women present. Realizing losing the factories meant losing the war, even non-combatants began helping produce military supplies. Robot automated factories increased production speed in several factories. They were able to increase the production of 155mm shells for the K9 self-propelled howitzer by more than 3 times, and a single factory was delivering 2,000 shells to the military every day. While making Hyunmoo ballistic and Cheonggang anti-aircraft missiles, they also managed to produce 2 extra Hyunmoo missiles daily. They kept their guns and equipment in top condition, while the maintenance depot received dozens or hundreds of damaged items from battles daily. But they were focused on increasing production and maintenance speed by replacing even one more nut or one more track. Military supplies from Japan were also steadily arriving at Busan port. Japan declared that it would maximize ammunition production to help Korea, and began exporting 155mm shells, 120mm mortar rounds, and 5.56mm rifle bullets, which were originally produced for the self-defense forces, to Korea. Japan saw its fastest economic growth since Abenomics. At Mitsubishi Heavy Industries in Japan, they make 100,000 bullets and 3,000 shells, supplying the Korean military with 200,000 rounds weekly. War demands revived Japan's defense industry and manufacturing. Japan's gross domestic product grew rapidly by providing military supplies to Korea. Japan couldn't intervene directly in military matters because of post-war laws, but the war allowed them to greatly expand their defense industry. By exporting large quantities of 155mm shells and rifle ammunition, which were previously produced only for the self-defense forces, to Korea, Japan enjoyed the economic benefits of the war, and its gross domestic product growth rate increased rapidly. China and North Korea strongly opposed, calling Japan a deadly war participant, Korea Land and Geospatial Informatics Corporation. Meanwhile, this corps rapidly advanced toward Wonsan on Route 5. In particular, the 7th Infantry Division, known as the 7-Star Unit, demonstrated overwhelming power in battles with North Korean forces. They quickly destroyed North Korean defensive positions, using large-scale bombardments and tank breakthrough tactics to massacre the enemy. When they saw the enemy, they would unleash 155mm shells on the North Korean trenches, destroying the soldiers inside. They used high-explosive shells to clear out the enemy, causing explosions that instantly threw the North Korean defenses into chaos. They used drones and satellites to strike key enemy positions, causing heavy North Korean losses. The 3rd Armored Brigade's K1 and E1 tanks advanced faster and confidently despite shellfire from all sides. After that, infantry disembarked from the armored vehicles and finished off the remaining North Korean soldiers, taking control of Highway 5. The North Korean forces had no choice but to collapse helplessly. Because the Chinese volunteer army didn't support this area, the North Korean forces' collapse was likely inevitable. As the corps advanced, thousands of North Korean soldiers were killed and entire units wiped out. However, there were also unfortunate situations. North Korean soldiers who had lost their will to fight would come out of collapsed trenches with their hands raised. The smell was awful, the air thick with blood, and the soldiers' eyes were cold. Seeing the surrendering North Korean soldiers, the soldiers would kill them without any change in expression, saying they would repay them in kind. They seized part of Highway 5 and advanced north. The goal was Wonsan. Securing the supply route and controlling Highway 5 became top priorities for the 5th Corps to attack Wonsan. The 2nd Corps advanced without much resistance. As the 2nd Corps continued to advance, North Korean casualties had already exceeded several thousand. The number of dead North Korean soldiers alone was over 3,500, and more than 2,000 North Korean soldiers had been taken prisoner. However, due to a lack of capacity to accommodate the prisoners, handling them became a problem. That was the news story.
The 2nd Corps had over 2,000 men cross over, and the number of North Korean soldiers taken prisoner was over 1,000.
The 2nd Corps and captured North Korean soldiers crossed over. The 2nd Corps took 2 prisoners in the North Korean army.
0 people crossed over.